Hello, I'm Lele. Welcome to my channel. I will continue to tell you about the book Wuthering Heights.
After Heathcliff's abrupt departure, Catherine couldn't bear it. She fell seriously ill, becoming more capricious, irritable, and arrogant than ever before. Gradually, time changes many things. 3 years later, Catherine married Edgar. Initially, their marriage seemed harmonious, but this calm was short-lived. One September evening, their lives were shattered. Because Heathcliff returned, after so long, no one knew what he had been through. But now he returned in splendor. Heathcliff didn't receive enough love, so the hatred in his heart hadn't dissipated. After returning, he had completely changed, becoming someone else entirely. He had grown into a tall, robust, well-built, handsome man. His straight stature suggested military service, and his facial expressions and demeanor appeared much more mature than Edgar's, displaying a wise countenance that erased all traces of his past destitution and lowliness. His eyebrows were low, his eyes filled with black flames, hiding a wildness within. Though he seemed overly serious, he also had an elegance, bearing an imposing demeanor and refined temperament. Catherine kept her eyes on Heathcliff, afraid that he would disappear again in a blink of an eye. She was overjoyed, but Heathcliff didn't look at her much, though occasionally he would glance swiftly in her direction. But each time he withdrew his gaze, he appeared more confident than before. Because from the other's eyes, he felt unreserved joy. Both were immersed in the joy of reunion, feeling no embarrassment. With Heathcliff's return, there began a more frequent exchange between Thrushcross Grange and Wuthering Heights. Just when everything seemed prosperous, Isabella, Linton's sister, confessed to everyone that she had fallen in love with Heathcliff. Although Catherine opposed it, describing Heathcliff as brutal and greedy, hoping Isabella would give up her unrealistic fantasies about him. But Isabella didn't believe her sister-in-law. During an argument with Catherine, Heathcliff declared that he had returned for revenge. He wouldn't give up his hatred for Catherine's sweet words. Instead, if Isabella loved him, that was even better. Because this girl could become his best tool for revenge, how cruel these words were. Before long, Heathcliff proved his words with actions. He eloped with Isabella. Meanwhile, Catherine fell ill again, her mind became confused, and she developed meningitis, all while being pregnant. Edgar Linton had no choice but to neglect his sister, devoting himself to caring for his wife, Catherine. Slowly, Catherine's health improved. Although still somewhat confused and sometimes not recognizing people, she was obviously much better than before. 6 weeks later, Isabella sent a letter announcing that she had married Heathcliff, hoping her brother could forgive her. However, Edgar Linton did not reply to her.
2 weeks later, Isabella sent another long letter, this time addressed to Mrs. Dean. In the letter, Isabella said, "Even if it were a tiger or a snake, it wouldn't frighten me like this. I hate Heathcliff to the bone, and my suffering is beyond words. I was so."
After reading Isabella's letter, Mrs. Dean was extremely worried. It was clearly a cry for help. This little girl was in dire straits, and she had to go to Wuthering Heights to see her. When Mrs. Dean arrived at Wuthering Heights, she found that the once lively and bright yard now appeared gloomy and desolate, with stains and dust everywhere on the cupboards and tables. What's worse, Isabella seemed to have been infected by the indifferent atmosphere around her. Her beautiful face became pale and haggard. One's well-being or misery shows on their face, and Isabella was clearly unhappy. Heathcliff then asked Mrs. Dean about Catherine's condition and demanded that Mrs. Dean find a way for him to meet with Catherine. "Otherwise, I won't let you leave Wuthering Heights. Look at this man, still ruthless as ever." Mrs. Dean refused his request. But Heathcliff persisted, saying, "Do you think she's about to forget me? You know she won't. You and I both know that every time she thinks of Linton, she thinks of me 1,000 times. There are 2 words that summarize my future: death and hell. Living after losing Catherine is hell." He didn't care about Isabella's feelings as he spoke these words. He then said, "But I was confused for a moment, thinking Catherine valued Edgar Linton's love more than mine." Bah! Linton is nothing compared to her dogs and horses in Catherine's eyes. He's not worth loving, unlike me. How could Catherine love something he doesn't have? In the end, Mrs. Dean was forced to agree to help Heathcliff deliver a letter to Catherine, and if she agreed, find a chance for them to meet. For days later, Mrs. Dean finally got an opportunity and gave the letter to Catherine. Although she didn't get any response, Heathcliff boldly barged in. Soon, he found the room where Catherine was. He rushed to her side and hugged her tightly. Heathcliff didn't speak, nor did he let go of her hands. They hugged for about 5 minutes. Catherine kissed him first, and Heathcliff was heartbroken, unable to breathe, unable to bear looking at her face. From the moment he saw Catherine, Heathcliff knew she wasn't going to get better. "Oh, Cathy! Oh, my life! How can I bear it?" was the first sentence he uttered, in a tone that did not seek to disguise his despair. "What now?" said Catherine, leaning back and returning his look with a suddenly clouded brow. Her humor was a mere vein for constantly varying caprices. "You and Edgar have broken my heart, Heathcliff, and you both come to bewail the deed to me, as if you were the people to be pitied." Heathcliff had knelt on one knee to embrace her. He attempted to rise, but she seized his hair and kept him down. "I wish I could hold you," she continued, bitterly, "till we were both dead. I shouldn't care what you suffered." "I care nothing for your sufferings. Why shouldn't you suffer? I do. Will you forget me? Will you be happy when I am in the earth? Will you say 20 years hence, that's the grave of Catherine Earnshaw? I loved her long ago, and was wretched to lose her, but it is past. I've loved many others since. My children are dearer to me than she was."
You see, Catherine's emotions were extreme anger, extreme despair, and extreme heaviness.
Heathcliff replied, "Don't torture me till I'm as mad as yourself. Are you possessed with the devil to talk in that manner to me when you are dying? Do you reflect that all those words will be branded in my memory and eating deeper eternally after you have left me? You know you lie to say I have killed you, and, Catherine, you know that I could as soon forget you as my existence. Is it not sufficient for your infernal selfishness that while you are at peace I shall writhe in the torments of hell?" Their feelings were so intense that even if death took them away, the flame of life burned fiercely. Catherine said, "I'm not wishing you greater torment than I have, Heathcliff. I only wish us never to be parted, and should a word of mine distress you hereafter, think I feel the same distress underground, and for my own sake, forgive me." Heathcliff replied, "You teach me now how cruel you've been, cruel and false. Why did you despise me? Why did you betray your own heart, Cathy? I have not one word of comfort. You deserve this. You have killed yourself. What right had you to leave me? What right? Answer me, for the poor fancy you felt for Linton. Because misery and degradation and death and nothing that God or Satan could inflict would have parted us, you, of your own will, did it? I have not broken your heart, you have broken it, and in breaking it you have broken mine. Let me alone. Let me alone," sobbed Catherine. "If I've done wrong, I'm dying for it. It is enough. You left me too, but I won't upbraid you. I forgive you. Forgive me." "It is hard to forgive, and to look at those eyes and feel those wasted hands," he answered. "Kiss me again, and don't let me see your eyes. I forgive what you have done to me. I love my murderer, but yours. How can I? They were silent, their faces hid against each other and washed by each other's tears.
Shortly after, Edgar returned. Seeing Heathcliff, he was furious and astonished. He rushed toward Heathcliff, but Heathcliff placed the unconscious Catherine into Edgar's arms, asking him to attend to his wife first.
At midnight, Catherine gave birth prematurely. Her child was born, only 7 months old. 2 hours later, Catherine passed away. Edgar wept bitterly, finally collapsing on the pillow, pale, silent, just like the Catherine lying beside him. Catherine's funeral was set for Friday. Before that, her coffin was placed in the living room, where Linton kept vigil day and night. Meanwhile, Heathcliff stayed in the garden every night without rest. Mrs. Dean was moved by his determination and decided to give him a chance to bid Catherine a final farewell. During the few hours that Linton rested, Mrs. Dean opened a window and Heathcliff cautiously entered. He opened the small golden box around Catherine's neck, containing her husband's hair. Heathcliff took out that strand of hair and replaced it with one of his own black hair. Mrs. Dean picked up the lighter hair, opened the box, twisted the 2 strands together, and placed them back inside, the 3 of them tangled together, inseparable. The day after Catherine's funeral, Isabella escaped back. She was in a sorry state, with a deep wound under one ear. The cold weather prevented excessive bleeding, but Isabella's fair face was marred with bruises. After Mrs. Dean bandaged her wound and changed her clothes, Isabella removed her ring from her ring finger and threw it into the fireplace. She cursed Heathcliff fiercely, blaming him for ruining her love and her life, wishing that devil would disappear immediately. Then Isabella told Mrs. Dean what had happened. Last night, just before midnight, Isabella deliberately provoked Heathcliff. She said, "At the Grange, everyone knows your sister would have been living now had it not been for Mr. Heathcliff. After all, it is preferable to be hated than loved by him. When I recollect how happy we were, how happy Catherine was before he came, I'm fit to curse the day." These words triggered Heathcliff's explosive anger. He grabbed a dining knife and threw it at Isabella, cutting her ear. Hindley then rushed in, and the 2 men fought. Isabella managed to escape quickly and return to Thrushcross Grange. Isabella didn't stay long at Thrushcross Grange. She settled in the south. Several months later, she wrote a letter saying she had given birth to a son, her and Heathcliff's son, named Linton. Half a year after Catherine's death, her brother Hindley also passed away. Heathcliff became the new master of Wuthering Heights. He cruelly retaliated against Hindley's son Hareton, humiliating the boy just as Hindley had treated him years ago. Meanwhile, at Thrushcross Grange, Edgar underwent significant changes after Catherine's death. He resigned from all his duties and never ventured far from home again. The farthest he went was to Catherine's grave. He deeply missed his wife. Fortunately, Catherine left behind a daughter. This daughter soon comforted his heart.